It's a Golden Road TV show. Well, bridging the past with today for a better tomorrow.
Golden Road explores the intersection of arts, environment, culture, health, peace, justice, science, and technology, paving the road for positive social change.
It's a Golden Road TV show. It's a Golden Road TV show.
On Sunday, November 12th, from 3 to 8 p.m., Golden Road TV and radio show, in collaboration with Lotus Guide Magazine, the Traveling Medicine Show, First Resilience, and the Digital Media Center present a resilient community building event, creating unity in a divided world.
The event's going to start with an opening ceremony, followed by speakers, music and dance performances, Metaflix presentation. There's going to be a community drum circle and potluck, an open mic, and a think tank vision council.
If you're concerned with issues like arts, culture, education, economic development, food and water security, independent media, holistic health, and self-sustainability, and emergency preparedness, we'll see you on Sunday, November 12th from 3 to 8 p.m. at the Digital Media Center, 104 New Mohawk Road.
Okay, thank you all and welcome back. We're on the Fall Resiliency Building Tour in Nevada City, and we have some panelists here from the speakers earlier. We lost a few, but we gained a few, and I'll give you a few introductions here. Anja Hinault is one of the community members here, and he's been working for several years now on sustainability issues and resiliency issues, and he's become somewhat of an expert in composting and reuse. He worked for a little while at the Restore, where he instituted a lot of new ideas for repurposing items, and he has a lot of expertise and ideas in terms of how to live in a good way. Another person who has joined us is Cathay Fish. She is a permaculture expert from this community. She's been doing permaculture for quite a long time now.
I want to mention the 6 steps to resiliency. And can you guys hear this okay? Radio check back there? It's good? Okay. I want to start at the bottom. So there's six goals, 6 steps. Number 1 is conventional practices. And that's one step better than breaking the law. We've got a lot of that now. I want to just for a moment, mention agriculture. When you look at agriculture, honestly, you have to wear a hazmat suit to even go out in the field, and then magically you can take it to the store and it's all better. Do you know that we spend, on our every calorie we eat from conventional agriculture, we spend 10 calories of energy. It is completely non-sustainable, and it couldn't even work unless the government threw billions of dollars into it. It's really a sad state of affairs. One step better than breaking the law. Isn't that impressive? Number 2 is green. You probably heard about green. Green your machine, green everything, right? But everybody's in on green. All the cars are green, everything's green, right? So it's kind of a slogan, but it's a relative improvement. At least there's some consciousness there about moving up from conventional practices. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is the 3 that I just mentioned to you. I'm going to mention one more. All of these are heavy energy sucks, all of them. And where we want to move with the last 3 is using much more conscious energy and while using less fossil fuels. Everybody knows that now. Everybody's wondering how to do it. So number 3 is what we call sustainability, or a sustainable system. And what is sustainable? Well, unfortunately, because I use the term now because it's identified with something better, but actually sustainability just means it's neutral. You're just doing the same thing and you're keeping it going. So it's 100% less bad. But sustainable is not the goal. It's not the end all, even though we talk about it. And I know a lot of you know this. So number 4 is restorative, and that's human doing things with nature to make up for all the damage. And here in Nevada County, we have so many mines. I think it's like 450 mines that need to be rehabbed in Grass Valley and 250 or so in Nevada City. We have tons of damage here. Most people are not aware of it because you can look past it. And you can go down to Providence Mine and see the work that Sierra Streams is doing to rehab the Providence Mine. It's wonderful, and it's right up permaculture's alley. So that's the fourth. We're using natural systems as patterns to restore. And it's about time that we're doing this, and this is happening all over the world. I'm about to go to the International Permaculture Conference on Thursday, and we will be getting reports from all over the world about restorative work people are doing. Number 5 is conciliatory, and that's like forgiving ourselves for how we've messed up so bad, because we have, and going back and listening to the indigenous people. Tribal people, indigenous people seem to have an innate heart for nature and understand the importance of natural patterning. Unfortunately, when mining came in here and logging, there was no heart for nature, as if it wasn't part of us. And so the Indians, a huge genocide happened with the Indians, and at the same time, almost everywhere in our county, which is Nevada County, for those of you as our neighbors, all our rivers, and we've got some amazing rivers here, all of our rivers have been mined twice with arsenic and mercury. So that's stunning. So we have work to do as far as reconciliation it goes. Now, the highest place we want to get to is regenerative. Instead of sustainable, we want to be regenerative. And this is us participating as partners with nature, where we and nature can co-evolve the whole natural system to fulfill all our needs. And while we fulfill our needs, all the creatures on the planet can fulfill their needs at the same time. I have to say this because this has been bugging me for so long. We got to stop using war to fund multimillionaires to make money. If we took just 1 year of our military budget, we just took that 1 year, we could build sustainable housing, sustainable permaculture, homesteads with clean water, solar electric, with permaculture food forests and gardens, and permaculture livestock, agroecology for livestock. So there's no reason that we cannot do this. What it takes is a will to do it. We are the biggest energy hogs in the world. We're 5% of the world. We use 25% of the world's energy. I got to say, we're up for a rude awakening, and it's coming soon. So we've got to do everything we can to create resilient communities right now that are regenerative. And that includes understanding how living systems work and thinking of the whole ecosystem and every watershed as a living system. I hope that was helpful for you, because that's the kind of stuff I love to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That was wonderful. So like I mentioned before, we are creating an asset directory that can be used by the public to see who is working on these kinds of issues. If you have an issue that you're passionate about, you want to find out who to contact, look at the asset directory, figure out how you can get involved where you most feel activated. The other thing that I want to remind everyone of is that we're working to break ground on a center to continue to further these ideas and further this type of communication and cultural engagement, a cultural center where we can foster these ideas to become part of our culture. So let's get to the meat and potatoes here. We want to have a conversation here with all the public and with these wonderful people that have agreed to share their knowledge with us. This is an open dialogue. What that means is, keep in mind, we're having a conversation. Answer a question, keep it, brief. You don't have to one-word answers, but let's give space for everyone to speak, is the idea. So, I'll start off with a few questions. I have some questions prepared, but if people in the audience want to answer or ask questions, or people on the panel, feel free. If you want to step in or add something. This is a conversation. We're coming together now to build these ideas, to talk about what our communities should look like and how should they function. So let me start it off here with a broad question. A lot of you have come up here, and you're experts in your field. This is your job. Your organizations are doing amazing work. But what can individual people do who live in their houses and go to their job every day? They may not have a lot of time. What can they do to make a resilient community, to contribute to their resilient community? What are some of the things that they can participate in, or how can they get involved to create this regenerative culture that Kathy was talking about? Does anybody feel compelled to answer that question?
Thank you for that question. I think that one thing that individuals, especially in today's day and age in modern times, convenience is everywhere. And sometimes what is lost in convenience is community, economic, and environmental resilience. So individuals can make sure that they shop local and support small businesses rather than taking on the convenience of Amazon being able to get something to your door in under 24 hours. Taking the time to get to know your farmers, your local agricultural producers, and your community members will, in its time, create a more resilient, more prosperous, and more nurtured community.
Thomas, did you?
There's a wonderful story of the beginning of the City Repair organization in Portland, and there was a really traumatic event that happened in a neighborhood where 2 little girls from the neighborhood were killed in an intersection by a car. And that was a wake-up call for the neighborhood, and they decided to take over the intersection temporarily, and they painted a mural on the intersection as kind of a way of letting people know that this is a community here, and this is the center of our community. And they also began to take down the walls between their property on the inside of their blocks. And they began to create community space, a collaborative community space. Again, resiliency to me is mainly about building connections. Like, how many of us have had a potluck and invited all the people on our street to our house? There are some people in my neighborhood that I haven't done that with, and that's a huge one. It's like even just building those personal connections with people closest to us.
I think we are, as a society, are suffering from staring straight ahead syndrome or staring at glass syndrome. And in permaculture, we teach observation. When you move to a new property, you want to look around you for a year at least. And for me, it's usually both sides of my arms outstretched. When I'm going through my life, actually looking and observing things rather than just having this mentality of staring straight ahead. So I've learned a lot of things since the fire we had earlier last month, where fire got within two streets of my house. I was already pretty awake to fire because a previous Tahoe National Forest supervisor lives across the street from me, and he's on it all the time. But after that fire came, I look around my neighborhood and I realize there's people I don't like in my neighborhood. There's people who are kind of jerks. There's people that are my buddies. You know, we're organic and we're sustainable. We're into permaculture. And I got a whole new viewpoint. I started realizing that it's great to build community with people that you really like. Like, I've been involved with Thomas and the building community with the group there. But I realized I have to build community with my neighbors, my exact neighbors. And so my fire neighbor was saying, hey, look, there's 3 places here that you've got to look out with me. Because if a fire goes to those places, they could burn down everybody's house. So we can do the best job we can, but unless we engage our neighbors. And I took it in and I went, oh my God, I got to get over my stuff with these neighbors, because how am I going to work with them? And it turns out CAL FIRE has CFIP grants to help neighbors with brush. And if you don't have a big enough piece of property, you can have a number of contiguous properties to equal 20 acres. And I got it. That's what I got to do. I got to get past my petty stuff. To me, our human BS is like the last frontier. How do we get over it and really create community? It's really the truth. So I've been working with them and realizing, like, a lot of times when I have a thing towards someone else, it's over with. It's not a big deal, but sometimes it stays with me. I'm sure everybody has that problem too. But building resilience is having some way to create it as a community. And I can see right now that dealing with fire, do you know we have more houses in the fire area in this county, I think Placer too, is that true? Do you know? Than any other county in the state of California. We have a place to start community right now, right there. And you know what? Fire doesn't care who you are, what you look like, what you talk about, what you believe in. Fire doesn't care. So we need to build community in this area. And I think everywhere that you travel has that same problem of fire. So this is a way to start with fire.
Yeah, David. I just want to remind the audience members, there is a microphone if you want to step up. Go ahead and just take a seat in these chairs here, and I can signal you when it's time to come up.
Thanks for that, Kathy. I think, in short, one of the ways that if someone's at home can divert their attention away from the TV, there are so many events going on around this community. I happen to volunteer for the county fair. At the booth that I was at, there were a number of organizations making folks aware of the fire safe principles, the resources that are available in the county, and there's Earth Day celebrations. There's always informative booths. At the Nevada County offices earlier this year, a FireWise event was held there, and there were very, very few people in attendance. I spent the better part of the day there. We had a fire crew there. There's a lot of opportunity, but it's not always on TV. You can't see it there. You have to use the social media. So we've gone to a Facebook with the Forest Service, so www.fs.fed.us/Tahoe. You can find a lot of the things that are going on, and that extends to planning as well. Being aware on our website, you can find out all the planning that's going on for fire resilience, those types of projects. One that's going on already, it's past the planning phase, the Western Nevada County project, which is sort of integrated among all the private parcels and other parcels in the whole Deer Creek area. But that came with a lot of public support. It wasn't sued, didn't have an appeal, but people were engaged. People showed up. So I'm always impressed when that happens. I just encourage you to do a little bit more of that investigation to find out what's going on, how you can be more aware.
And I guess that's where I step in. We're going to change over that mic here. 15 months ago, I intentionally started a project called Golden Road TV and Radio because the idea is that wherever I went, from an airport to a mall to even driving down Highway 80 at 70 miles an hour, don't tell no one, that everyone is on their cell phone. So I believe this is what they call Generation Glow, where so much of our information, whether authentic or fake, we're getting through digital media. So I moved here years back from the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I worked for the Theater Arts Department, specifically to pioneer the show that would focus not only on Nevada County, but really on Northern California, focusing on the arts, the culture, the entertainment, but also the history, but also talking about things that mattered, like environment, holistic health, issues of peace and justice, and even giving people information that's digestible around science and technology. So over the last 14 months, we have broadcast pretty regularly, almost every Sunday, a 2-hour show on YouTube, and then we send that footage out to 10 counties to be played on cable TV twice a week. Sacramento, Placer, Calaveras, Amador, Nevada County, Truckee, Tahoe, Butte County and Chico, Shasta County, Siskiyou County, and we're adding Tuolumne, Plumas, and Fairfield County soon. And the idea is that we all live in an age of attention deficit. Maybe some of us who are older, who didn't grow up with cell phones, that's not necessarily an issue. But the idea is, how do you get people information? How do you get their attention and do it in a way that's very quick, concise, that empowers them? So even with this event, the idea is that we're starting an archive of content. You can go on YouTube. There's over 75 hours of programs featuring 150 to 160 different individuals and organizations that are our community. So that's something I've been doing in my commitment, not only to community, but to also education. And it's been an incredibly learning experience, and we're so blessed to live in this area, but we definitely have a lot more work to do. And I really love what you said about building the bridges to the people we might not necessarily regularly associate with. And I see that very prolific here. And just to finish, I actually did a whole feature on Bear Yuba Land Trust out at the Independence Trail. And I said, well, what's one of your biggest issues with trail restoration? They said, we cannot engage young people to come out and have any interest on getting on the trails and doing any sort of repair, fireproofing, or anything of that nature. So I bring this up because it's not the problem with the youth or Bear Yuba. It's just the issue of how do we bridge these chasms of information so that we can support each other and lift our entire community up and enjoy not just the security from possible catastrophe, which I have a different opinion about catastrophe. I worked a lot with the Hopi. We're in earth changes. There's elemental changes happening. So it's done to wake us up. It can be very sad and catastrophic, but it's kind of nature's way of kicking us in the butt and saying, you need to do something differently. But nonetheless, how do we bridge these chasms? And I think part of what we attempted to do today with Poyom and all the people here on the panel and the speakers early is to engage people and to let them know what's happening and get their involvement.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. That was good. Nobody else has anything to say? Oh, there's somebody here. You go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess the question was, what can everyday people do to make their life more sustainable?
That's right.
Well, to me, the most important thing is to educate our children, because they're the ones that are gonna build the world of tomorrow, and they'll know more than we ever will. So I guess education for the children is the main thing for me. And in my opinion, the best teacher is nature. So the best thing your children can do to learn about permaculture or life in general is spending time in nature with some friends, with some animals, with some plants. And I guess that's what's going to make them imagine a greener world for tomorrow.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree.
Are there any programs people here are involved in that are doing that kind of engagement?
That's right. So I don't know that I mentioned Ragnar. He is a specialist in compost and reuse and recycling, but his daughter is Anja Hinault, and I think that she's any of you who's heard her spoke earlier. I would say, sadly, she's an exception. It's incredible to have a young person so engaged, and I think we need more of that. And so, whatever you did, I'll give you I'll put the blame on you. But
so when Anja was a little girl, she lived out in the forest in Sweden, and she learned to appreciate nature. When she came here, she understood that many of her friends didn't get that same experience that she grew up with. And last year she went to a boarding school in Wisconsin called Conserve School. I'm sure she mentioned that.
She didn't have a chance.
She didn't mention that. Okay. So it's a boarding school that is funded for by someone with money. I don't know who it is. And to inspire the students to be more in touch with nature and from that, do good things. And it worked with her. So when she came back here and she went back to the Nevada Union, she started an outdoor club to help other students get out and experience nature more, understand that whole thing. And it has worked fine. And I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that brings me to this second question that I was going to ask the panel as these introductory questions, really. I have some more detail, but is how do we engage people? And Michael brought up this really important example of why independent media is such an important part of this, you know, on Facebook or on YouTube or however you get your media out to people. Other media sources that can say, hey, these things are important, you know, something not funded by large corporations that says these things are important and we need it. But how else? How do we engage people to take action, to get activated, to feel a desire to get up and do something or say something or make something that will contribute to the community in a positive way? If anybody feels interested to answer that question.
You know, I'm from the 60s generation, and we didn't have all the computer stuff, and we listened to a lot of music, but mostly it was books, magazines, and just talking to each other. I want to say that I think as educators, we have to re-educate ourselves about how to reach people who are maybe 20s, 30s. And when I ask them what they want, they tell me they want hands-on, hands-on. You know, they can watch everything on videos. I mean, the amount of information out there is just mind-boggling. But they want to be with you and learn hands-on. That's what I've discovered. So several of the groups that I'm in we're redoing what we do so we can reach out with hands-on, and that's changing who shows up at our groups. I would also suggest that you find permaculturists near you and ask if you could do hands-on with them, whatever they're doing. I mean, if someone wants to come to my place and do work, you know, this would be volunteer work. That would be awesome for you and for me too, as long as, you know, you're a heads-up person and you're not stuck on your glass. I mean, I've had people come out 10 minutes, they have to sit under the tree and do the cell phone, which to me is like, what a waste. The other thing is, I want to give you two things here. One is to have your family and maybe a couple groups of friends that you could walk to their place, right? Do a month of no food that's further than 90 miles away. So it has to be totally local food, and it cannot be processed in a big, huge machinery thing that you couldn't afford to have. Try that for a month and see what happens. And another thing I've asked my classes for years, is it possible that our lifestyle, our economy, our way of living could collapse? And when I first started teaching in 87, 88, maybe one or two people out of a class would say, yeah, that could happen. So if I ask you right now, is it possible for our way of living to collapse? What would you say? How many of you would say possibly, probably? Yeah, it's really shifted. People are smarter now. People realize what we're up against. And another thing you could do while you do the 90-day or do the month of food within 90 miles that was grown within 90 miles is to do at least a week, if not a month, of no fossil fuel energy. None. None, none, none. Do it for a week to start. But I would say, like even this fire that we just had, all the electricity was down in my neck of the woods. It reminded me when I lived in a cabin in the woods without electricity, without propane. And I went, oh yeah, I haven't done this in a while. Wow, I need to look at my systems again, okay? All my solar ovens, are they all working? And what about my solar charged batteries on my phone, on my light, my flashlight? And what about, and it just sent me looking at those systems again. Now realize, we've taken a big ride in this country with energy. We've fought 150, we've overcome 159 countries for our lust for energy, and there ain't any left. I mean, the rest of the countries are our allies doing the same thing. But the energy's not here anymore unless we turn to natural energy. So do that as a way to get your family engaged. And I got to tell you, most kids I know that have been involved in that had a really great time, and they learned really fast, faster than the parents. So try it out. That's a good one. Thank you.
It's a golden road TV show. it's a golden road TV show. Well, we've got it all going on here. It's a Golden Road TV show.com.
As the panel's resident 30-year-old, I can co-sign Cathay's point that yes, we are looking for hands-on experience. And to that point, there is an opportunity that has risen out of the political environment of the last year, the last 2 years, in that people are ready to act. We just need to point them in the direction. We needed to be able to take advantage, whether they are part of the resistance or on the other side. People are ready to be involved, and at the local level, we need to provide the opportunities. So when a parks bond comes up for the first time since 2003 that offers 4 times the amount of money that the Sierra Nevada has ever received, we need to let people know to be ready that will be on the June ballot for people to vote for, and to vote yes for SB 5, and to get involved with spreading the word about something that might not be as shiny as a presidential election, but that has a direct impact on our lives.
Thanks for that.
And I want to add to that. Did you know that Grass Valley and Nevada City and Truckee just won cultural designation? And when you talk about culture, you know what they were actually talking about, I think, was arts. But if you think of the other cultures, agriculture, community culture, and you think of all these cultures, I've talked to the organizers, and they're into us being involved at those levels. So why not? We've got this designation from the state.
Permaculture.
Permaculture is another one. It's pretty exciting.
Thomas?
I don't have kids, but I really appreciate the comment of the importance of teaching our kids. And but one question is, well, what exactly do we mean by teaching our kids or education? And as a young man, I was homeschooled. I was given the opportunity to do homeschooling, and my sister's kids are homeschooled. And I see a dramatic difference between, and it's not just if you're in school or out of school, but it's the difference between parents who are taking a more personal responsibility and active role in guiding and supporting their kids in their own paths of excitement and their interests. And some of the people I know who were given that opportunity by their parents and really, taken on lots of camping trips and spent a good amount of time in nature with that perspective, tend to have more of that perspective. But it was really that the key part was their parents being that role model and supporting that interest. In terms of some cool stuff going on with making some of these ideas more exciting for young people, one thing I'm really impressed with is the Polish ambassador, or local musician, who has a program called Action Days, and pretty much every single time he does a show, he has lined up afterwards the next day some kind of permaculture or gardening project, community gardening project in the neighborhood wherever he plays. And at his show, he speaks to that and says, hey, it's great that we're all getting together and partying, and how about we bring that into our community and do something that's actually, we can have fun there too. We can.
It's visionary.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I want to give props to that, to him and that idea. And then just speaking to Yuba Village, the 6-day event that we threw, the real heart of it were these hands-on projects. And, we kind of have this meta mission of building community, but the way in which we're building community is through actual hands-on projects of community space, building community space. And that's been really, really exciting and activating for the young people who've been participating in it. So it's a testament to this idea that the hands-on is what young people are wanting.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what you said about the Yuba Village, one of the things, and you mentioned this before about the potlucks that you had, and the piece about how the structure of that came together, it really got people interested, engaged, and having just regular conversations around the issue. So much of those potlucks was, I was at quite a few of them, just people talking and having fun together and hanging out, and a lot of that just like charged up this energy, and then they'd say, okay, so we're doing these different kinds of things for this event. Who's interested in what? And you just go to the place you're interested in and then meet with people and talk to them about what you're interested in. And it just brought this level of engagement that I think was one of the reasons why it was so successful at getting so many people together. I mean, for an event, the first time that was run by a small number of people, and there were, how many projects did you guys do?
Well, we had 4 hands-on projects, but we also had
workshops,
dozens of workshops. We had 4 community dinners,
a tea cart that people were volunteering at, and just, I mean, it was really a great event.
And I mean, something that's really important that you're speaking to, which is at the potluck, to me, kind of symbolizes the full intergenerational community. You know, we can have this hyper focus on how do we engage the kids, how do we engage the youth, but really part of it is how do we engage ourselves as a whole community in a way that's inclusive, and that's also exciting for the kids and also exciting for the older generations. You know, one thing we might be missing is this, you know, we have this tendency to be very good at having things in boxes. Yeah. And part of what we're getting at with the Yuba Village is just community is just personal friends and connections and relationships. And
did you have something you wanted to add? Okay, go for it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that question. It's really good. For me, what brings me to more sustainable life, what engaged me is action, seeing people doing actual action. Talking potluck is great. I go to a dozen of those. It's really great, but after a while, what's really bring me to do something. I'm from Quebec, like the other side of the country. We speak about the same thing here, there. So it's seeing people in action and to be able to talk about what you do to all people that you meet, like not the people that are just interested. Some people outside of that box that we create, again, like permaculture is another box, but to unfold that and to see that your neighbor that you don't like, maybe you talk about what you do a compost, and maybe it's gonna send some seed in there. So that's about dissolving boundaries, about your my group, not my group. Community is far wider than that.
Yeah.
So that's action, see people in action, and to talk about what you do to many people as possible.
Yeah. Seeing people take action.
Yeah, to dissolve boundaries we create, like they are bad, we are good. Yeah. They're just misleaded, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's to be wider in that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One of the things that I was, not that it was a fault of the organizers, but that I felt let down internally about the Yuba Village event was I was really hoping to see this wide group of the community engaged, and it's just difficult. It's difficult to do that. And the whole concept was, get together with your neighbors and what's the project you want to see happen to make your community, make your own space. And it was, even here, I think it's easy to assume, that we're all, a certain type of political bent. How do you reach out to those people that say, no, it's really important that I have my assault rifle because it makes me feel safe? How do I reach out to that person and say, come, engage in community discussion and invite your friends and be a part of this solution? That's also something that we need to try to do together. Did you want to?
Yeah, I grew up in New England, so a little bit of French up there, and one of my foundational things that I often think about is la patience est le chemin d'or. Patience is the way to gold. And patience is one of my primary P words, and perseverance is another one, and being positive. And so sometimes it's really hard to not just meet once, and you've met many times, so there's a certain amount of patience that comes with that, that if you keep striving to engage more and more people, more segments of the community, it'll pay off in the long run. I think so often in our own agency, it used to be you got to move around every couple of years. So it's hard to really establish yourself in the community when you're moving around that much. I've been very fortunate to have been in one place in the Lake Tahoe Basin for almost 15 years. That's unusual. Part of our whole family were involved in Education Foundation or Rotary or different things. And I think through it, working on issues in the community, nobody wants to just see, oh, here's this issue and it's all negative. So how do you stay positive? And really all three of those P's, because nobody wants to be on the bandwagon if you're negative. It's like, but if there's a positive light out there, you're going to attract more to that issue, that cause, and find solutions. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to demonstrate a little bit more patience, because not everybody's at the same place. And we often talk about, oh, we all need to be on the same page for this issue. Yes and no. Everyone has their own perspective, their own values, and we should respect that. But at the end of the day, what are we going to do about it? So sooner or later, with enough patience and perseverance and showing some path forward, we can find that way. And it does happen often with people that you don't want to have at the table, but those are the very folks you really need to have at the table. So this is something that in the Forest Service we work with on every project. And at the end of the day, a decision maker, it's not me, but our district rangers or our forest supervisors have to make a decision. And it's usually after considering a wide breadth of input and sometimes, very polar opposite views on what we should be doing. But you don't get your voice heard if you don't show up.
That reminds me again of something that Thomas said during his talk when he was talking about sociocracy and the consensus, that idea of consensus, and how important it is, not that everybody makes the decision so much, but that everybody's voice gets heard, that everybody gets to say, no, this is how I feel and this is what I think. That really is critical. It's something that Michael also is constantly espousing and reminding people that it's really important. If there was ever a time in history that people needed to speak up, now is the time. Yeah.
And I also think something that's really important, that as different as we all might be, or from different fields of experience, and I just know some people right now have a very negative view of the government or aspects of the government, but since over the last year, spending time with the founder of the Green Festival, Kevin Donahoe, who also works with Global Exchange that does programs in about 50 countries all over the world with human rights, that everybody is at their own place of evolution, none higher or lower, but we're part of this great circle. So like you were saying, with patience, we have to have some understanding, compassion, and patience for what part of that process people are in. But also, for me personally, in the last year and a half of doing the TV show, I've spent a lot of time with people from government agencies. And actually, it's really revitalized my respect and understanding of that, like we're saying, a lot of people are like, we want to do stuff, but we don't know how the system works. How can we make a difference? Recently, I was up at the Klamath working with people from the Forest Service, Anna Wright and Erica. And when they were doing a prescribed burn, and I could say, well, they're burning the forest. Why are they doing this, and smoke and the environment and all these things? I actually got the understanding through an open mind that they're working in conjunction with the native and indigenous people of that area, and that when they do a prescribed burn, they're actually consulting with the local native community to the extent where even how they burn, what plants or medicines are affected, and even in certain areas around sacred sites where men can go and maybe not women, but taking into context this whole idea of their indigenous spirituality and putting it in a cultural context. And I was really impressed that how they were working in tandem, as opposed to maybe my initial reaction of thinking about, these forests being prescribed burns. I also think that we're at a very exceptional part of history. I was born in 1966, and I was just born in the heart of a very transformational generation. And thank you. I mean, back to the land movement, the health food movement, women's rights, civil rights, organic food. I mean, so many things were beginning to be looked at differently in the 60s. So there was a lot of work that began to happen, and that torch is now being passed. So I do think part of the torch being passed is that Mother Nature right now is a great leveler, right? Because with oceans rising, with wildfires and all these various things that are happening, contamination of water, microplastics in all of the surface water, geoengineering, these things affect everybody, whether you're a homeless person or you're a billionaire living in a huge mansion on the hill. So I think more and more, in my understanding and the time I spent with the Hopi, we're in this time of this great escalation of all these elemental forces, earth, water, fire, air, that are going to inevitably lead humanity through a greater understanding and transformation. So, when you had talked about patience, I've been very dedicated to working on a lot of these issues for a long time. And, sometimes that frustration comes in, like, why isn't it changing? And then we start to get into judgment, and they're different or they don't see it. But it's really coming from our own individual perception. But I do think, and what I want to say is right now, a lot is happening in the world. Magnetic pole shifting, oceans of plastic in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, and it's affecting everyone. So I think more and more people are starting to wake up and realize that, peace, love, there's still a good idea, right? It hasn't gone away, and it's not just for someone wearing, flowers and dancing in the sunshine at a Grateful Dead concert. It's really something that's applicable to all of us. So it seems like most of the people I've met here today are carrying that compassion and that spirit of service, and it makes me very optimistic. And that's part of why we're trying to do the directory, to give people some ideas of where they can go, who they can talk to, and to let people know what they're doing. But I think that there's a great leveling happening right now, and a lot more people are starting to wake up. Even the use of the word resilient, it's an idea whose time has really come, because we're getting almost to the point of it's going to be really difficult to get back to a really healthy and sustainable environment.
Regenerative.
So more ideas from someone in the 60s about what we can do now. Another one is to go on a fast at your house, fast from technology. Have a fast. And go back to the old ways of having the family hang out. I remember as a kid, we played lots of games, and we did lots of outdoors sports. We played neighborhood hide and seek. We did all kinds of things like that. The neighbor kids and I would go hiking in the mountains. There's tons of stuff to do. But get your kids, get your families outside and together. Because what happens with glass is we tend to look at it alone, unless it's TV. Then we can all sit there in a daze. So that's one way to do that. Another thing is, I got to tell you, as a long-term activist, activism is so fun. It's so empowering. Myself and 4 other women and a guy were instrumental in shutting down the dirtiest smelter in the United States in Douglas, Arizona. And it only took us a year. It was so revitalizing. And our whole community, our whole border community revitalized once we were not being polluted by the stuff out of the smelter. It was huge. And it was so exciting, and I've never lost that. I do personal one-woman activism all the time. Right now I'm working with local, more conscious stores to get GMO out of the stores. I think many people have a resistance or a possible gut problem from eating GMOs, and they don't even know it. So I'm working hard on that, and I do other kinds of activism too. But get into activism with your family because it is a blast. It is, I can't tell you enough how empowering it is. You know, we are so powerful. We're just in a slug mode now. But once we all get together and say, this is enough, it's going to change really fast. So get in the habit of saying, this is enough, I'm going to change something. The other thing is, I know this family who spends about $10,000 on each person buying gifts for Christmas. You know, do yourself a favor. Have a Christmas where everybody makes the gift for the other person. Make it real. Make it about Christmas, not about things, because that's very empowering too. So, you know, I hope this conversation that we're having inspires you, because there's so many things we can do. There's just so many things. And if you don't know what to do, call up some groups. Like you were saying, volunteer. Call up some groups. Everybody needs help right now. And volunteering introduces you to other people. And in our hearts, that's really what we want is community.
Oh, Ragnar.
And if you don't want to volunteer for an organization, you can just volunteer for your neighbor and say, hey, I volunteer to make you compost. I've noticed that you don't have one.
Yeah.
And I have made about 10 composts around in my neighborhood. And some of them are still there and some failed. But it's an easy way to do things better. Do it yourself and make other people do it themselves. And it's the same with a lot of things, you know. If you know how to do a trick, you can teach someone to do the trick. Just show them how to do it and be there for them. And one day they will be there for you too and show you some tricks.
Yeah, that's great. Any other questions from the audience or comments? Or this is great. I love this conversation that we're having. Oh, here's somebody.
There was one thing I wanted to say about, he said something about kids not being engaged. I think that if you look at, I think instead of thinking like, oh, we want these kids to be involved more, I think we got to look at it as like, these kids, like teenagers growing up, they deal with a lot of hard things like bullying, cyberbullying, maybe mean parents, drugs, alcohol, peer pressure, all these things, right? So I think instead of looking at why aren't they engaging, maybe we can give something back to them. How many of you know Neo? You know that
yes.
Exactly. You know why they're so successful? Because they give something back to the kids. The kids are actually getting some, there's not a lot to do in this town. Well, there is to get engaged, but like not a lot of like, you know, fun things to do. So maybe they give like, we'll teach you how to do this or that. And so that's why I feel like Neo is so successful. If we want kids to be engaged, we should give them something that will
that they want to be engaged.
Yeah,
in.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I thought like would be good to say.
That's excellent, and thank you for mentioning Neo. They're an amazing organization,
Yeah.
and they're definitely one of the pieces of this community that makes it such a resilient community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I like that.
I have something to say.
Great.
So I think that there's a lot of things that we could support, and that there's also things that we don't want to be supporting, and where we put our money is important, and to make conscious decisions about what we spend our money on and where we're putting it and where we aren't putting it, and to try, and Cathay talked about this, but try and support local stuff. There's so much extra environmental and economic impact in transportation of goods, so if we can, and we're supporting our own community and making our community more resilient if we support local stuff. So.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just want to acknowledge that Sherry's on the board of the. You're on the board of the new North San Juan.
No, it's not new, but North San Juan
community centers. So they're doing a lot more work right now to get things happening up on the ridge. So that's been really exciting to get to hear some of what they're talking about. We invited someone to come and talk a little bit about holistic health today. They couldn't make it, but I want to talk about, I don't want to be conspiratorial, because one thing I don't want to do is polarize people. But a couple of my initial concerns, immediately talking about resilient, right? About flexibility, the analogy Payom used, you crush a dry leaf, it falls apart. You crush a green leaf, it pretty much comes back. It might be changed, but it still doesn't get destroyed. Is issues in our own community that I think are of utmost importance. And part of putting together this asset directory is starting to identify not only individuals and organizations doing stuff, but what are some of our concerns and issues in the community? Because as soon as we know that, we can kind of direct some of this youth power, community engagement, and other things for some people who might not know what to do. So a couple things that I'm really concerned about. First and foremost,
we're getting political now,
is Roundup. I read an article recently, and I confirmed this with Renette, that the majority of NID water and a lot of the drinking water in our county has glycophosphate, which is a derivative of Roundup, a weed killer. So as permaculturists, I'm not that person. I would like to see maybe more awareness about people stop using Roundup weed killer, because it's really not just killing weeds, it's killing our community, and it has a very extremely detrimental effect on the body's immune system. It actually shuts down our immune response so that we're much more susceptible to illnesses. So that is one of the big issues, along with basic food security. I know we have probably about 60 some odd organic farms in the area, and there's great delivery programs, and there's farmers markets. But like you were talking about, food within a 90-mile radius. And I'm also posing this as a question. I might be ignorant of what those answers are or solutions or what's happening, but immediately talking about quality of life and resiliency and sustainability, those are the things that really come to mind. The last thing I want to mention is we invited the Office of Emergency Preparedness to come, Patty. They couldn't make it today. There's obviously a lot to do, but I think people should have a basic understanding and plan of how to do basic things like first aid, holistic health, how to take care of yourself, and to do some basic things, because even, and again, not to be political, I'm not sharing my political view, but recently I read in the paper that they said FEMA is on the verge of being broke, and President Trump said, FEMA is not a cavalry that's going to ride in and save you in a time of a natural disaster. We're more of an insurance agency that comes in and does cleanup and tries to help people put their lives together. And the Department of Public Health is almost broke also, and not to mention what's happening with healthcare and stuff. So those are some of my immediate practical concerns as far as us here in Nevada County: the food, the water issues, and also the ability for people to empower ourselves. I think the day and age of completely depending on whether local, county, state, or federal government to be saving us or doing everything for us is changing rapidly. And I say that with absolute respect for the things that are being done right by our local and state and federal government in conjunction with that. But those are some of my most immediate and serious concerns.
Thanks for bringing that stuff up, Michael. I'll just quickly say a few things. One, about the Roundup, it's not just, it's in Nevada County, there's a lot of people who are concerned about it being in the water, but it's not just in the water, it's in the wine, it's in, who knows, it's gotten into our food system in a very deep way, and it is concerning. And then the other thing that you said about, well, thank you for saying what you said. I forgot what the other part that I was going to mention, but that was good stuff. Thanks.
Michael, you said a lot of stuff there, so
that was a lot of stuff.
I want to talk to just a little bit the Roundup. So I have a severe allergy to Roundup. I cannot eat at a restaurant or any food that has Roundup in it, or I get severe gut problems. So that makes me an activist, but I want to say that I have been activating around here. When I moved here, well, at least when I moved to my farm and I found out that NID, which is above my house, had Roundup in it, I was so shocked. At the same time, my HOA, Homeowners Association, was spraying Roundup on the road. And on that road, if it rained, it would go down to my ponds. I was stunned. Then I found out that NID also puts algicide in the water. And I just want to say to anybody that's using Roundup out there, seriously, it causes cancer. It's listed in the state. Do you really want to have breast cancer? I've already lost 2 people on my street, to 2 women to breast cancer. Do you want to have prostate cancer? Seriously, keep using it.
There are alternatives.
There are tons of alternatives. Do you know what we did on our street? Once I started bringing the studies in, I joined the HOA board, and we mow now. You know what it costs? 1/10. We paid 2 kids, or 2 young adults, to weed eat our street twice after the rain stopped. Yeah, no more Roundup, thank God. But think about this. If you spray Roundup or any other poison, because there's other bad poisons out there, not just Roundup, where do you think it goes? Seriously. So NID uses, or has been using, I know they're in a process of wanting to stop lawsuits, so they're trying to get rid of it. But they had in the past used it on the ditches to kill the plants on the banks. Then they put algicide in once a week, at least on my ditch and most other people's ditch, to kill algae. Where do you think that stuff goes? Well, I live at the end of the ditch, and I can tell you where it goes. It clogs up my ditch and all my sprinklers, and it's the biggest heartache I have in my life in the summer. Thank God we have wonderful rivers here to swim in so that I'm not completely bummed out. But that makes me an activist because I want to stop it. But where do you think it goes? It goes into everything, okay? Now, I'm a master gardener from the University of California, and I run the Speakers Bureau there, if you ever need a master gardener speaker. And one of my master gardener friends asked me, I would like to do some talking for the Speakers Bureau. And she was at the home show that the union puts on, and she was giving out information for master gardeners, and I think it was the Rotary or one of the service organizations asked her if she'd come speak to their outfit, okay? She's also the woman who runs the Society of Garden Goddesses. So she asked me, what do you think I should speak on? And I said, why don't you speak on Roundup, and I'll even help you make the slideshow. But her activism was so good, and it was so fun. You know, once I showed her how to do a slideshow, now she knows. Her slideshow started out by just talking about how we garden and what certain people use and what happens when you use it. And it was very well put together. It was just excellent. She did her research. And then she said, I received so many questions about, well, what do I do if I don't use Roundup? And she said, well, why don't you eat it? Now, most people don't know that we had some amazing Native Americans still living here from this area. For us, it's the Nishanan. And everywhere I've lived in this area, I've seen the so-called weeds that they have selected for living all over the place. I mean, you could tell where they hung out. And when I first moved here, I asked the farmers, what pest weeds do you have in your farms? And guess what they were? Lamb's quarter, purslane, plants like that, amaranth, dandelion. These all have more nutrition in them than stuff we go buy in the store. So guess what my friend did? She brought her solar cooker, and she cooked them gourmet meals from the weeds that they've been spraying. And that's kind of hands-on. And they got it right away, and they wanted recipes. You know, we've got to help each other out. We really do. That's a pretty creative way to do it. It's a really creative way. So think of creative ways. And I really want you to invite your kids to help you doing this, because kids are really, really smart. And they have to, when they are in school, whether it's homeschool or regular school, they have to come up with stuff. They have to come up with ideas. They have to write things. Why not ask them? They're fresh. They've got all kinds of good ideas.
Good idea, yeah.
Why not? Now, you said a lot of other things there, but those were the ones that really touched me.
Brittany, did you want to mention something? Yeah.
quick point to Michael's point regarding the need for self-empowerment around natural disaster preparedness. Sierra Business Council just received a grant. We're very excited about that. We'll be holding workshops throughout the Sierra Nevada, including in Grass Valley in May 2018, helping small businesses set themselves up for natural disaster preparedness. And I think this last year is really showcased, and the ongoing efforts and issues around FEMA funding shows the need. So hopefully we'll have people turn out and engage.
Yeah, that's great. So any small businesses out there, keep that in mind, Sierra Business Council.
Yes, stay tuned.
I remembered the other thing I was thinking about. You mentioned food security, and, you know, I would be interested to know, like, how could Nevada County, how far do we have to go as a county to satisfy our needs? Now, we're very lucky that we live so close to the valley. 1% of our food is local, within 20 miles or 50 miles.
1%,
Yeah, yeah.
Which is really unfortunate.
Right, but which is more than most communities.
It's true.
If you couldn't hear her, she said we're feeding 1% of our community with local food. So,
I really love your point there, Cathay, the story about the cooking of the weeds. It reminds me of a wonderful walk I went on with a woman named Katrina Blair from Colorado, who I know you know. And the walk was of edible weeds. And she's written this amazing book called The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, which is about these 13 kinds of plants, including the ones you said, that exist everywhere where humans are on the whole planet. And they're like the front lines of the plant kingdom that are taking back over areas that we've disturbed. So not only are they nutritious, but they're also like some of the most hardy plants of restoration, of like bringing nature back into these places that we have impacted. But this book, The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, kind of goes into these 13 weeds and also like talks about their history and has recipes and amazing medicinal properties of these plants. So I wanted to speak to that.
That's really excellent. What was her name again?
Katrina Blair.
And The Wild Wisdom
of Weeds.
That's wonderful.
Well, I want to add to that. If you don't know this book, Living Wild by Alicia Funk, is so amazing.
Local
especially
author,
if you live up here in the foothills. She's talking about what grows here, and she's got recipes and medicinal uses of these and just practical uses of them. I love that book. It is so, so good. Check that book out. And I don't know if you know, in Placer County and Nevada County, we have some of the most amazing collection of wild plants anywhere around, especially in the state or any of our neighboring states, these two counties. And a lot of these, like my personal favorite one is serviceberry. I don't know if you've had it in the mountains, but I grow them on my land. They are the best. They are drought tolerant trees. They have no bugs. They don't have anything bugging them except for about a day before the harvest. Every bird around is hanging out. But if you could deal with that, it's like a cross between a blueberry and like a raisin or something like that when they're dry.
So
it's so good.
I know she didn't mention this, but after saying that, I realized I should probably plug Kathy a little bit. She teaches classes. She is a certified permaculture instructor, and she does it every year, once a year, something like that, twice a year. So if you're interested in learning more from this woman, feel free.
I've taken a weekend workshop with Kathy. It was great on permaculture. Service berries just came up last night. We had a fundraiser last night for the Dene called the Beauty Way Tour that Clandaiken does every year. And Shelley Covert was there, who was here earlier, the spokesperson for the Nishnam tribe. You did, so that you're the source. Because just last night, a while ago, she told me that the name of our river is the Yuba River, and that the word Yuba is a Nishnam word, which comes, and they pronounced it Uba. And it was a name that they had for serviceberry.
Oh, how interesting.
I said, do you know what a serviceberry is? I said to her when she told us that, I was at the dedication of the bridge. What is that, the bridge across the Bear River.
Yeah, on the Tribute Trail.
Tribute Trail.
Yeah.
She did a thing there, and she mentioned that, and I said, do you know what a serviceberry is? And she said, no. And I said, oh my God, my favorite tree in the mountains is serviceberry. So I would love to get serviceberries planted in local parks around here.
On the
In
Tribute
fact, me and some of my permaculture colleagues, specifically Renee and Tom Wade, we're talking about doing, through this agriculture or designation of cultural communities, we would like to do a local food forest with native, regular perennial fruit trees and stuff, and native fruit trees, somewhere here in Nevada City or Grass Valley. And we're talking about doing it maybe starting in the spring.
Oh, great.
And the other thing that I want to mention is in working with Alicia Funk, Alicia asked me if I would take my permaculture skills and come up with a list of 5 plants, native plants, that farmers locally could integrate into their farming that are more resilient, they're more native, they're more drought tolerant, and regularly produce great crops of food. And I'm thinking, I'm really hoping that if we did this, we could have a local brand like, I would like to see personally, but anybody could come up with it, a really beautiful picture of the Yuba with the covered bridge over it, and do it something like Nevada County, special value added, where people harvest stuff and can make something to sell. So when people come to visit us, they can take something home with a picture on it. And that's what she was asking me to do, is come up with something like that. I'm not going to tell you what the 5 plants are, but if you ever hear me speaking at something, I will be speaking at the Sustainable Food and Farm Conference here in Grass Valley at Nevada Union on February 10th. Actually, I'm the MC on the 10th. On the 11th is my workshop, Introduction to Permaculture, and I promise to put those 5 plants in there if you come hear it. And I also would like to invite anyone from any of the counties that you go to come to our event, because it's all about localizing food and localizing. We're hurting so bad for farmers. And I don't care what kind of farming you do. If you're only farming one thing and it's monocrop, I would highly like to suggest to you that you diversify. It's time to do it now, okay? And I think it's time for us to work together as a community to diversify the crops that we grow in this county so that more and more people can be resilient, because that's really what it is. You know that Safeway in an emergency has 2 hours worth of food? When I heard that, that got my attention. Yeah.
So when you mentioned that, I'd like to mention also in the spring, Michael and I have been talking about doing another event, Earth Day weekend with Kevin, what's his last name?
Kevin Donaher,
the founder of Green Festival. He's going to participate with us, and we wanted to have it be like a regenerative workshops, permaculture workshops and regenerative workshops for people to engage in. So if, Kathy, maybe we could talk more and include some of your ideas if you're interested. So, yeah.
Well, it's not just me. It's all
Tom
permaculturists.
Wade. Yeah,
I mean,
right.
why
I've
do you
met
think
Tom
Thomas got into Yuba Village? Because
Yeah.
it's part of permaculture.
Yeah, and Yuba Village is very much a permaculture.
I mean, permaculture is the common person's way of healing this resiliency issue.
Well, the name is
It is.
resilient name, right? The permanent culture, yeah, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, my reason for starting Yuba Village is many faceted, including permaculture, of course. But I think someone made a comment that I think is really appropriate to one of my motivations for Yuba Village and community building in general, which is shifting the thinking from how do we get them engaged to how can I engage with them? Or what is it that I can do that's stepping up and seeking out and proactively attempting to engage with? And that's true for kids. It's true of all, multi-generations, us as a whole community. And that's one of the main reasons for Yuba Village is an attempt to, and this is the first time I've really stepped out into my community in this way. I've, for most of my life, I've had work that's very kind of solitary. I'm a computer programmer by trade. I'm happy to just hang out at home and do my work and not, but I've always been But activism and volunteerism has always been a part of my life. I say that, but at the same time, I really value community. This is my hometown. I have a great stake in this place. But the vision for Yuba Village is primarily, what are the things that we can do where it's us getting together and engaging in us, really. It's like by us, for us, etc. And it includes so many different things. I mean, obviously food security and resiliency are part of it, but to me, like, getting back to what I said originally is community itself is the solution. Community, the more sense of community we have, the more of this just feeling of being in a village. Now, granted, we don't live in a village here, but there is this ineffable quality of what it feels like to live in a village where you know a lot of people, you just have this sense of safety and security that comes not so much from, a big bank account or a big retirement, but from knowing and trusting that you have a whole network of people who have your back and whose backs you have too. And which gets into something you said, which was, what are the major concerns of our community? When we first started Yuba Village, we did a survey, and what are the major concerns of people in the community? And some top ones were drug addiction. That was one of the top ones. And some of the most cutting edge research into the solution to addiction is actually trusted social, personal bonds and relationships. And that, the drug addiction is almost like a way to numb the pain of missing the sense of community, missing the kind of connections and relationships that we have in a healthy community. So again, community itself is the answer. And the more that all of these different facets that we're talking about become real and become stronger, the more chance we individually and collectively have for riding out these big challenges that are most definitely coming our way.
Yeah, and you mentioned drug addiction, but there's all kinds: addiction to food, addiction to your screen, addiction to all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have, Michael mentioned we didn't have somebody from the emergency response here. We didn't have somebody from mental health, or he mentioned we have alternative health practitioners. All of these things are really important in terms of making the community resilient. One thing that David had talked about, and him and I were talking earlier, and he mentioned about, after a forest fire, there really is like some serious trauma that people go through when they lose their home and lose all their things. And if we can make sure, like you said, that the community has their back, that is what makes this resilient community. They have people to stay with and people to talk to. And I was really heartened to see on Facebook that there was an event that was, scheduled after the fires just for that purpose, for people to come in and deal with the trauma, which I was really happy about. So I want to mention we're getting close to the end. If there's anyone else from the audience that has comments or questions, feel free to step up to the microphone. If any of you here on the panel have things that you feel like you've been wanting to say and haven't said, now's the time. I'll mention again that Michael and I were also talking about breaking ground on a center where we can engage in these issues more deeply, house resources, a place for people to come and learn more, put on events, whatever that means. And what I've heard is hands-on, right? So do workshops, participate in the building of the space. And
it's really exciting because sometimes we can feel like we're part of a counterculture, or we're a small demographic of people against all these huge issues. But recently I spent an afternoon with Poyom up in Quincy with Kevin Danaher, who founded Greenfest, a hugely successful, completely alternative, completely green, 99% green. I'm talking about after the event as far as waste it generated, the carbon footprint. And what's amazing is he's working with people like Amazon and Jeff Bezos, Facebook, and others who, even though they're wealthy and we can see maybe they live in some ivory tower on a hill and it doesn't affect them because they're not like our regular demographic of community, but these are the people through their success that are realizing what's happening all around the world affects everybody regardless of income level. And there has been hundreds of millions of dollars donated specifically for education and developing community resiliency centers. Actually, Berkeley just received a huge grant. I believe it was somewhere in the area of about $5 million. They're building a state-of-the-art resiliency center. Kevin's building one in Quincy. They're taking an old school building and renovating it into a center. Next week, we're going to be up in Mount Shasta. Some folks from the Silicon Valley who have been very successful with technology and the dot-com industry have just bought 250 acres to start a center up there with a performing arts theater, working with helping to bring the salmon back for the Winnemem and the people who live along the Sacramento River. I also met Eric Gonzalez. They have 1,500 acres and are saying, we're trying to start community. We have this land. We're looking for people who want to get grounded and start working with the land. So everywhere I go, from the top down, it really opened my eyes to the power of this whole movement, whether it's more grassroots, what we're doing in our community, whether it's happening on a federal level with different federal agencies. It really blew my mind. And so I wanted to say that as an encouraging note that in whatever you're doing, you're not alone. Today we did this event as an experiment, and we feel it's been pretty successful, especially everything that's been discussed today. We're going to be putting out and broadcasting it. We're going to be in Shasta next week, and then the next week in Chico. And we do have huge interest right now from Kevin Donahoe, Lou Casabianca, who works with Resilient City Academy, and other people who want to do a weekend permaculture conference in Nevada County, because we really are a model in so many ways for the world. And that's why I moved here. I feel that this is an epicenter of what community really means. I'm one of the new members here, but people like Thomas have been doing it for decades. Other people have been here for a long time, and I've even met people who have been here 30, 40 years who are doing amazing things. So we're not alone. We're going to put together a directory. We're going to do this whole Earth Day weekend, and we are actively looking at properties right now to basically start a whole ongoing center.
Yeah, and at this center, I think it would be great if we could have places at the center where we could demonstrate how someone can prepare their property if they live in the wildland urban interface, or to have a place to have events where people can come and have music, or to have like permaculture demonstrations of how to grow multiple different crops in one place that could feed a lot more people, or to have like waste recycling. People can bring compost from the town or whatever.
And there are people doing this now. I mean, this isn't a new idea. We're just trying to
have it as a demonstration site, so people can go there and participate and see it and be a part of it. Yeah.
Any questions? Any last input? And we're going to just do our closing statements. We're going to finish. I also I see her in back, and I just once again I want to thank NCTV and the Digital Media Center of Nevada County and Ramona Howard for this space and all the great work to give us a microphone, really to our community and to the world, and the amount of work that it takes to make this happen. So I just want to give her a nice round of applause. Thank you. And I'll pass the mic just for closing comments. And again, thank you everyone for coming out. Make sure you filled out the sheets so we can stay in touch with you. And we'll continue our work.
Thanks. Really happy to be at this event. As a relative newcomer to the community, personally, covering up my Forest Service shield, it's wonderful to be here. It is like the universe speaking. This is one of these places that my wife and I have found people are engaged. And that does translate into the national forest, where I can tell you another national forest, if we got 2 or 3 people at a public meeting that countless staff had spent hours, if not days, preparing for, was a success. And it's if we have less than 50 people, there's so much more engagement, more interest in what we're doing on the National Forest. And I think also I want to mention again just the partnerships. If you support and volunteer other organizations, that often there's a piece of what they do on the National Forest. So there may not be the direct mechanism to work with us although we are working on citizen science opportunities, I'm trying to get, I actually have a small grant for the Big Tree Grove in Placer County. So we're trying to build a program there. We're also trying to build a model that works in Fresno and in South Lake Tahoe, the Generation Green, engaging high school students. We have a GS pay scale. They're GS1s. So the very first step, but they learn everything about what we do on the National Forest. And a lot of these kids are kids that come from backgrounds that they haven't been out in the woods at all, and they live right here. And so we're trying to engage in that segment of the community and really connect them to the environment around which they live. So really excited about the things that are coming. They're not really here yet, but I think this is a great first step, and I'm feeling very inspired. So thank you.
Again, I want to thank you all for doing this. This is a wonderful conversation. More of this, please. I think, yeah, for me, it's the two aspects of what can I do personally. You know, what way can I engage with the community? You know, we have these problems. What is there something I personally can do? You know, I've had someone who was homeless now living on my land for 6 years, and that's been a tremendously valuable learning thing for both of us. But that to me is an example of what can I personally do to solve this problem. And then there's collectively, you know, I know, I'm blanking on his name, the founder of 350.org. You know, when people ask, what can I personally do?
Is that McKibben?
Yeah, McKibben. His answer is organize, 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 organize. You know, so it's like, yes, I can grow my own food as much as I possibly can. You know, the more food we can eat from within 20 feet, the better.
More weeds.
But also, like, what can we collectively do? And the more that we get out there and proactively organize and volunteer and engage with those parts of our community or parts of you know, the problem, the better. Thanks.
I'll pass it over to Kathy here.
I want to remind you of the 6 levels to resiliency. First being conventional practices. Look at every part of your life. I do it all the time. I stand at the gas station pumping gas and going, look what I'm doing. I'm pumping a fossil fuel into my car. I want it to be aware. I want myself to admit that I'm doing it. The conventional practices have to go. They're not working. Number 2 is green, which, remember, it gives you a relative improvement. And I want to say this about green. The step is usually recycling. We really need to be very observant about recycling and understand where it goes. Do you know that the consumers are not asking for product made from recycled plastics? And most of the recycled plastic goes into the dump because there's nothing to do with it? It's really something to think about. Where is all this recycling going? Number 2, a local community store manager told me that he's in crisis about one thing having to do with recycle. And that is his organization throughout the country is mandating recycled food. Like if you go to buy something from a deli or something like that, that all the food has to be in recyclable packages, all made from GMO corn. We've got to ask questions about everything. It's not enough to accept, oh, they're recycling. We have to talk to them about it. Where's it going? What's happening with it? What's in it? Do I want it on my food? Number 3 is sustainable, which is 100% less bad, but it's neutral. And we have to move into restorative, where we're actually healing the damage. Reconciliatory, where we're actually saying to nature and the indigenous people, you know, we're sorry, we're ready to take the right place now, and you can give guidance to us. To regenerative, where we're co-creating a better system for all the creatures on the planet.
Let's do it.
And I would just say that, okay, if you want to do a change, just do it at your own back door and your backyard. Pile it up in a pile and make soil of it.
Start there.
And if you don't have enough to do compost, to grab it from your neighbor. It's a lot out there, and it doesn't need to go to the dump.
Start now, don't wait.
So, I started with Sierra Business Council almost 5 years ago now, and SBC has always been about working from the middle out. And that didn't come naturally to me. I lean a little bit more radical and a little bit more direct. But I have seen the benefit of working from the middle out, of being invitational and being open and listening to points of view that you might find hugely incorrect, but to points that have been made over and over again tonight, the power of patience and in listening, and it's a tough double-edged sword because we don't have the time to be patient and to listen, but find those moments and find that common ground, and together we can tackle these catastrophic issues that we're facing.
Well, thank you all so much. I really enjoyed this. I'm just thrilled that this came together so well. I hope that we can collaborate with all of you in the future. I said something during my introduction earlier, which I really hope that humans can get to this place where we can remember that really this is a part of nature, and we forget that. Like, we are not separate from this planet. Like, this planetary system was part of what made us, and we made this. And not to say that this is great and we should, love it, but the fact that we think of this as not being part of nature just illustrates how much in our minds we've separated ourselves from the natural world. That we don't believe anymore that we are part of the forest and we are part of the raccoon digging in your garbage can in the backyard, that's us. Like, that's not different. We're all together here, and we all need to work together so that it all works for all of us. Even the neighbor you hate, or even, the ants in your sink. Like, we all have to figure out how to do this together. So that's where I want to go. I want to remind everybody that this is archived, and you can watch it on YouTube. And Golden Road TV show. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
For the International Health Program, and we want to shoot a 30-second video to put it on the blog.
Sure. What we're doing is we're building a movement. There's a global values revolution going on, and we're going to save humanity from itself. We're going to reach the precipice and go, no, wait, we're not going to go over that. And we're going to go back and we're going to fix this stuff. And we won't see it, those of us alive my age, but our grandchildren will see it, and they'll thank us. And they won't be ashamed of us. They'll thank us for having saved humanity from itself.
Tell us about the cult of powerlessness.
Well, the cult of powerlessness is people making excuses. It's cynicism. Oh, you can't really fix it. Kevin, I agree with you about injustice, environmental destruction, but we can't fix it. Cynicism is what passes for insight when courage is lacking. Cynicism is what passes for insight when courage is lacking. And it's unfortunately rampant among intellectuals in the academy because people are comfortable and they don't want to commit to struggle. And we have to really be against that and convince people that it's in their own self-interest to get involved in this global revolution. First ever global revolution. First time that a revolution has been truly global. Unite with each other and to unite with us to change the system from bottom up to the top And my argument is the old model was you build a political party that can control the government and the government changes the economy from the top down. I'm saying reverse that. Get the economy at the local grassroots community level, build up from there and get control of the state from that community base. And that way it'll be more rooted in the community, more democratic and participatory, and it'll be more sustainable.
I have the privilege of working inside the city government of San Francisco at the Department of Environment, which is responsible for all things environmental in San Francisco. We have more than 100 staff working on energy and biofuels and transportation and urban agriculture, a wide range of issues. But I run a nonprofit NGO that is inside the Department of Environment. It's a very interesting government agency. We have 2 business associations inside this government department. One is large companies focused on climate change, and one is smaller local companies that are very green, that have passed a very difficult screen of criteria for being a green enterprise. So it's a government agency with 2 business networks and a nonprofit organization inside that government agency. So it's rather unique. Now I want to switch back and forth between these 2 slides. This is San Francisco now, and this is San Francisco in 2030. If you look in the bottom right side of the screen, you will see the ocean levels. We are an ocean city. This is the bay, but it's ocean water. And in a mere 20 years, we are going to have billions of dollars worth of property underwater. We are already having serious problems with ocean level rise when storms happen. So why is San Francisco so green? When the green city competitions happen, San Francisco is always up at the top or near the top, and it's largely because of the Department of Environment where my office is located. The website is sfenvironment.org. Legislation is essential. This is a picture of our mayor, Ed Lee, signing legislation, moving us forward in the area of urban agriculture, which I'll touch on in a moment. The government brings law. The private sector companies bring in investment and job creation. The nonprofit NGOs bring in activism and education to stimulate citizen mobilization. We have, by law, mandatory recycling and composting. Every business and every home is required by law to separate their garbage. 3 bins. The blue bin is recycling paper, cardboard, cans, bottles. The green bin is compost, eggshells, coffee grounds, banana peels, etc., that we make soil out of. The black bin is what goes to the landfill. Our goal is 0 waste by 2020. Currently, we are at 80% resource recovery. Only 20% of our waste goes to the landfill, but by 2020, we want to be 0 waste. Our compost is made into soil, many different types of soil, a different type for the vineyards to make wine, different type for vegetable gardens, different type for golf courses. Because we are using up our soil, in every country, the soil is being washed away or blown away. If we don't recreate the soil, we will have a massive food emergency. So getting to 0 waste, we banned styrofoam. In restaurants, when you get food to take away from the restaurant, it has to be in a compostable container. It can't be in styrofoam. In 2007, we passed a law banning plastic bags, those little takeout bags in stores. And that applied to the big stores, and then just now in 2012, we extended that to all stores. No more plastic bags. We reduced toxics. We passed a Healthy Children Ordinance that took the lead-based plastic out of toys and things for children. That then caused the state of California to pass a similar law, and then the federal government in Washington passed a national law along the lines of what we started in San Francisco. This is a picture of our future zero waste facility. This will take us about 4 or 5 years, hopefully, and it will take all the garbage of the city and either recycle it, compost it, or create biofuel from it in order to get to zero waste. We have charging stations that the city is creating around town to encourage people to use electric cars. Our taxi fleet has already beat the Kyoto targets for 2020 by going electric, hybrid, natural gas with the taxi fleet. We have extensive programs for clean energy and efficiency. People can get money to insulate their homes and create energy efficiency in businesses. We are saving 60,000 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's the equivalent of taking 12,000 automobiles off the roads forever through these efficiency programs. We have the #1 green policies of any city in the country. The UN Climate Change Conference in Durban, South Africa in 2011 gave us the #1 prize for the strongest green building policies. Every new building or any major renovation of a building in San Francisco must meet the LEED standards of the U.S. Green Building Council for energy efficiency, water reclamation, etc. We just passed new laws to promote urban agriculture in San Francisco to make it easier for people to grow food in the city and sell it right inside the city. The best restaurants advertise that their food is local and organic. We have an Environment Now program which takes low-income people and educates them with eco-literacy and training, and then they go out into the neighborhoods to educate the businesses and the citizens about all the different programs we have and why they should get involved. We have a publication called Making Sustainability Profitable, which explains to the businesses that if you use less energy and less water and less heat and less electricity, your profits go up. To destroy that myth that, oh, to save the environment, it will cost jobs, it will cost money. No, quite the opposite. Green jobs in the United States over the past 10 years have grown twice as fast as non-green jobs, and they are more resistant to depression. We do community outreach. We have teams. Our largest section of the Department of the Environment is the outreach team, which I work with very closely. We do hundreds of public events every year where we are out in the street. We take all this equipment and the tent on an electric bicycle with a cart in the back so we can take all the equipment with no impact, not rely on cars, and we educate the public in their neighborhoods about all the services that are available. We host foreign delegations from China and India, from France, from Nantes, from Denmark, from other cities in the United States. This actually is one of my responsibilities, to meet and greet the foreign delegations and explain our different programs. We use our offices as a party space, as a social networking space, because there are green people within government, within private companies, and within the nonprofit sector, and oftentimes they are separated in silos. We work to bring them together because it takes all three sectors to make the kind of changes that we need. This is an idea that I'm pushing, and hopefully we will make it happen. Eco Gym, where the stationary bicycles, the rowing machines, the arm cranks will all generate electricity into the building, and we're designing a bicycle that will have a little desk that you can recharge your laptop or your handheld devices for in the airport. Because in airports, there's never enough plugs, right, to recharge our devices. So people can get some exercise. You're sitting on the plane for too long, you know. We emphasize education. We have 5 full-time staff who do nothing but go into the schools, particularly at the young ages, and educate the children about environmental issues, because these children will eventually be running the world when the environmental crisis is much more serious than it is now. We have to learn to be good ancestors. We think of ancestors as people that came before us, but we are ancestors as well. If you look at the great cathedrals like Notre Dame, they took centuries to build. The masons who laid the foundation layer, they knew that they would not see the final product of their work. But they knew they had to do very precise, solid work because of all the weight that was going to come on top of their work. Well, that's us. We are the masons who are responsible for laying the foundation layer of the future green economy that will be sustainable, that we won't have wars for oil and starving children. And that will come about. It's just a question of how long is that going to take. Mother Nature's core principle is unity of diversity. That's the central principle of nature's operating system, unity of diversity. And now we are learning to replicate that law in our society. San Francisco is a very diverse city. We reach out, our materials are in Spanish and Chinese and Russian and Vietnamese because we want to bring people together into this movement. We are lucky in that we have a prime directive from the green architect, William McDonough. How do we love all the children of all species for all time? If that was the prime directive, we would be able to fix these problems. And I'll conclude with a little story, because the question is, can we do this? Can we muster the courage to do this? We were in Haiti with a group, a reality tour with Global Exchange, a group that I co-founded years ago. And we were up in the mountains in a little shack, very hot. It was the middle of the night, and one of our men in the group, a wealthy man from Philadelphia, he couldn't sleep. He went outside, and he was sitting outside, and he felt somebody looking at him, and he turned around, and these two little children were peeking at him. He said, "Come here." And he didn't speak Creole. They didn't speak English. He started drawing pictures, and they started gesturing, and they started to communicate. And one of the children said something to the other child, and, "Oh, good idea." They took him by the hand, and they start leading him up the side of a mountain. This man was white, and he thought he wasn't racist. But he started to get scared, thinking, maybe these kids are taking me, and their big brother is going to grab me and steal my wallet, or put me in a big pot and cook me like a Tarzan movie. And he keeps getting more and more fearful, and he's scared by his own racism. And as they go higher and higher up this mountain, he's thinking, maybe I should just run away from these children. They finally get to the top where he's thinking he's going to run away. They stop, they turn him around, they face him east. It was an east-west valley. The sun was just coming up, and the shafts of light were coming through the trees, and all the birds were coming to song. He said it was the most beautiful experience of his entire life. And he looked down, and these two children were looking up at him with these big smiles on his faces. They changed his heart forever. If those two children can do that, then we can go out and create a global values revolution to fix what's wrong with this world. Merci beaucoup.
So I think a lot about the contrast between banality and wonder, between disengagement and radiant ecstasy, between being unaffected by the here and now and being absolutely ravished emotionally by it. And I think one of the problems for human beings is mental habits. Once we create a comfort zone, we rarely step outside of that comfort zone. But the consequence of that is a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Overstimulation to the same kind of thing, the same stimuli again and again and again, renders said stimuli invisible. Your brain has already mapped it in its own head, and you no longer literally have to be engaged by that. We have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand. There's a great book called The Wondering Brain that says that one of the ways that we elicit wonder is by scrambling the self temporarily so that the world can seep in. You know, Henry Miller says even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes an infinitely magnificent world in itself, you know. Darwin said attention, if sudden and close, graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement. That's what rapture is. That's what illumination is. That's what that sort of infinite comprehending awe that human beings love so much. And so how do we do that? How do we mess with our perceptual apparatus in order to have the kind of emotional and aesthetic experience from life that we render most meaningful? Because we all know those moments are there. Those are the moments that would make Final Cut. Only in these moments we experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. This is the rhapsodic, ecstatic bursting forth of awe that expands our perceptual parameters beyond all previous limits, and we literally have to reconfigure our mental models of the world in order to assimilate the beauty of that download. That is what it means to be inspired. The Greek root of the term means to breathe in, to take it in. We fit the universe through our brains and it comes out in the form of nothing less than poetry. We have a responsibility to awe. There's so many people who say that human nature is savage, that if we could rid ourselves of social constraints, we would become animals and literally eat each other alive. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think there are sides of us that are quite brutal and quite selfish. But nature has given us many gifts, among them something called the helper's high, the neurobiology of helping others. Literally, acts of compassion, acts of kindness. When we submit, when we volunteer by our own volition to serve other people, to extend our hands towards one another, we get a biological reward. Our brain literally rewards us, secretes pleasure chemicals. It drugs us into bliss to reward us for being kind to one another. I mean, you guys understand what I'm talking about. Our fundamental wiring is there to give us a prize, right? To give us a reward, to be kind and collaborative and cooperative with one another. This is known as the helper's high. It's what people say that nothing gives them as much satisfaction as helping other people. Now, it makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint that we would have inherited this biochemical reward for working and collaborating with other people because we take care of our tribe and we're more likely to survive by working together. All good, the science is there, I love it. But it's the metaphysical dimension that really turns me on. It's turning to this wiring during moments of despair, when we think the world is going to hell, when we fear that what is out of sight is out of mind, and we feel that the world perhaps lacks compassion. I mean, watching the media these days certainly makes you feel that way. And I guess what I'm saying is that it's during these moments that we might turn to this awareness, to this notion that no, my friends, that our fundamental nature is good, that our fundamental wiring is set up in a way to give us gifts, to shower us with blessings for being kind to one another. At the risk of repeating myself, I guess what I'm saying is, it is its own reward. Do not seek external payment. Trust in the inner satisfaction that you will get by offering your life to some higher purpose. Find the need that's lacking in the world and turn your passion into a purpose. And I don't know, I mean, that's the kind of thing that certainly makes me willing to get up in the morning, to believe that that by making a fundamental difference in someone else's life, I'm also getting off. And that's not a bad thing.
Nearly 4 billion years ago, the first single-cell organisms emerged from the Earth's hostile early oceans. A far cry from the roughly 37.5 trillion cells in a single human. Homo sapiens evolved from its nearest primate ancestor less than 2 million years ago. Evidence of modern humans only dates back 200,000 years. During this cosmic blink of an eye, every cultural, intellectual, and technological revolution the Earth has ever seen has come, gone, and radically altered the world that once was.
There's a great documentary called Transcendent Man that says that we've seen exponential growth in biological evolution before. You know, he talks about how long it took from like the Cambrian explosion to this like other significant era, and that, you know, something took 1,000,000 years, and then it took 100,000 years, and then it took 10,000 years, and so we were seeing the telescopic nature of evolutionary change happening pre-technology and happening post-technology. And so what we're having is evolution itself evolving its own evolvability. The rate of change itself is accelerating.
If human evolution occurred in a cosmic blink of an eye, this is nothing compared to technological evolution. Today, our symbiotic relationship with technology is shaping the future of things to come. And it's not just us who have evolved. Our technology has itself taken giant leaps. The first computers were developed in the mid-1940s. These 30-ton, 1,800-square-foot machines were able to execute roughly 5,000 instructions per second. Today, the cell phones in our pocket are capable of rocketing through 25 billion instructions per second. A little over half a century later, the first computers have become obsolete relics. The evolutionary rate of computers goes beyond anything ever experienced on planet Earth. Moore's Law has successfully predicted that processing speeds will double every 2 years, having a major impact not only on our technology, but also society.
It's a living thing. It's self-organizing. The same way that made single-celled organisms turn into us, these technologies are, they're almost alive. This is an anti-entropic phenomenon that we're seeing that's being birthed out of biological life and is continuing. You know, but this is only the beginning. When we can start messing with our own biology and really transform and create new genres of human, you know, we're going to be more individuated and more unique, and more of us are going to become dynamic works of art. And so it's less consensus and more radical individuation. Human beings are defined by their capacity to redefine their boundaries. Human beings are not, they don't end at the edges of our biological tissue. You know, when we use tools, those tools are appendages, extensions of who we are, and those tools shape our behavior as much as we shape them.
The human species has always strived to improve, to evolve, and survive beyond its natural boundaries. We've shaped our environment to meet our needs, and developed more sophisticated techniques to mold bronze, then iron, all on the back of our technological knowledge. And just as we've adapted these tools to modify the world around us, we've sought to modify ourselves.
When we mess with the outside world and our relationship with the outside world changes, we end up messing with our body. Like, we've always had that symbiotic relationship. We invented stone tools 100,000 years ago. Our jaws physically shrank, so we started messing with our body. You know, we started cooking our food, and that meant we didn't have to spend all day eating raw food. So then there was all this time, and that messed with our idle time, and it messed with the activities that we came up with. Then maybe culture kind of emerged out of that space, according to the ideas of some thinkers. So I think that to breathe is to mess with our bodies. And so we might as well be conscious of what we're doing rather than unconscious.
follow the golden road. Follow the golden road. Follow, 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 follow the golden road. We're off to see the Golden Road TV show. You'll find it is a whiz of a show, if ever a show there was. It's arts and culture and history, environment, health, technology, and peace and justice, science, just because of the meaningful things it does. We're off to see the Golden Road TV show.